austerity means that you're going to, you might do both of these things, but you're going to reduce G and you're going to increase T. So it might be just one of those, or you might do both. And the whole point of that, Jonathan, is to lower the budget deficit, yes. On Radio 4 this morning, as I was driving in, they were interviewing a young lady from some economic strategy company, and she was saying that last month was the highest borrowing on a monthly basis since records began in the UK economy. I think it was something like 36 billion borrowed last month alone. And she was saying that used to be the case in terms of how much an economy would borrow for a year. And now it's per month. So enormous amounts of borrowing going on at the moment. And then the interviewer said to her, do you think that this is a bad thing? And she said, no. She said it's not actually... Well, a really interesting point she made was that at the moment it's not actually economic stimulus. It's just propping up the economy. It's not actually stimulating anything. It's just kind of keeping the economy in survival mode. And the other interesting thing that she said was that because interest rates are so low at the moment, it's a good time to be borrowing. Right. The first official estimate of GDP for the second quarter of 2012 sharpened the focus on the UK's weak economic performance. Figures released show that GDP had declined by 0.7%. So we've just read an article there said 9% drop this year. So kind of pales into significant insignificance. In the shade now. Predictably, some economists saw this as further evidence of a need for the UK government to change the direction from austerity towards simulation of growth. Right. Now, if we have an output gap, a negative output gap, Megan, one of the questions I think you had to do for homework was to probably draw the diagram for negative output gap, was it? The analyze question? Or maybe you didn't say explicitly to draw it, but you might have drawn it. So price level, real output, long run aggregate supply, YF. So that is a substantial negative output gap. And here we have the title of this saying fiscal austerity. So can you see any problems with introducing, and this is what David Cameron, particularly when he became Prime Minister, is particularly what he engaged in. What's the problem with operating an austerity policy when you've got a negative output gap? It what, sorry?
It increases the negative output gap.
It increases the negative output gap. And why does it do that, Alana?
Because you get in less government spending, which is a component of GDP. And if people are being taxed more, they're not going to have as much disposable income to spend, so consumer spending reduces.
Exactly. So at the time of writing, well, at the time of this particular policy, there was consternation because people were saying, what, the economy's in the Great Recession and you're thinking of a policy and austerity is going to reduce G, as you quite rightly say, components of G. It's going to increase T, depending upon which particular tax or corporate taxes might hit firms. But regardless of that, all of those things combined are going to reduce AD and shift the AD curve left, thereby doing what to the negative output gap. So this was very much the coalition government's policy back in the day was to introduce this type of austerity. So David Cameron was in coalition with whom? Lib Dems, okay. And Nick Clegg. And who does Nick Clegg work for now? In New York. In New York, he works for Facebook. So those two together, they were introducing this austerity policy. Now, remarkably, actually, through that period from 2010 onwards, the economy, as opposed to contracting, it did actually start to recover. But nonetheless, the policy was introduce an austerity policy, and people, particularly on the other side of the House, so in the Labour Party, they were totally against this, and they were saying, do what, Ellie? What would they be advocating? Well, yeah, I mean,
Lots of government intervention and lots of government
yes,
expense.
because they thought, it's a good time to borrow. It's relatively cheap. Let's borrow. Let's spend. Let's hope to narrow that negative output gap. Let's hope to go in this direction. So, hopefully, what they would say is they would have a growth of what? Apart from Y. So Y would grow, but what else would grow? Because the economy is getting bigger. And then you're able to pay out debts. What does the government use to pay back debt? Tax. And what type of variable is tax, Ellie? Induced. Yeah. And so the thinking would be, well, as Y increases, your tax revenue will increase, and then all this money that you're getting to stimulate growth, you'll be able to use that to pay down your debts. That's the thinking on it.